In this video, you will learn about the distance formula as well as the equation of a circle. Now, as we begin, there are some terms that we need to know. So the first term to know is what is called a coordinate plane. A coordinate plane is this entire picture that you see over here, where we have two main lines cutting through, and then we have all these other lines as well. So this is called a coordinate plane, or another term is called a Cartesian plane. And notice with these two main lines cutting through, we have four different parts of this plane. Those parts are called quadrants. So we have our four different quadrants, where quadrant 1 starts here in the top right corner. And then quadrant 2 would be over to the left, then quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. It is important to note which quadrant is which. So we start with 1 in the top right and work our way counterclockwise to get the other three quadrants. Now, where these two major lines intersect, that is called the origin, which is where we begin when we graph different points. And then these two main lines cutting through are called axes, which is plural for axis. So the one axis is called the x-axis, which is this horizontal line. And then we have the y-axis, which is this vertical line. Now, to remember which one is which, if you take the letter y and extend the letter y down, notice we have created a vertical line, which is what we have for the y-axis. The y-axis is the vertical line. Now, from here, within a coordinate plane, we can graph what are called ordered pairs, which is two numbers. The first number is the x value. The second number is a y value. Now when I graph, we have, like I said, the x-axis and the y-axis. Now for the x-axis, the positive direction is going to be to the right. So this direction over here. Whereas when I go to the left of the origin, that's going to be negative. For y, up is going to be the positive direction, and then down is going to be the negative direction. So when I have a positive 3 for x, that means I go in the positive direction for x, which is to the right. So I go to the right 3, and then I go 2 in the positive direction for y, which would be up. So I go up 2. So to the right 3 and up 2 from the origin, from right here, would take me to this point. Now if I had another point, 0, 4, again, x is 0 and y is 4. The first number is x, second number is y. So x is left and right. It is not going left or right at all. So I don't go either direction, but I do go up 4 because y is positive 4. And the positive direction for y is up. So I go up 4 to get this point right here. Next we have negative 3, negative 1. Again, x is going to be this first number, and y is the second number. So if x is negative 3, that means I go to the left 3 on the x-axis, and then I go down 1 in the negative direction for y. So negative 3, negative 1 would be to the left 3, down 1 to get this point right here. Next we have 2, negative 3. So positive 2, negative 3. So if x is positive 2, that means I go to the right, which is the positive direction for x. Then y is negative 3, which means I go down 3, which is the negative direction for y. So to the right 2, down 3, takes me right here. Next we have 2, 0. So x is 2, y is 0. So that means I go 2 to the right, which is the positive direction for x. And then I go down 0, so I just stay right here on the x-axis, and I get this point. Alright, so that's how you graph ordered pairs. Now, next we're going to work with distance. How do you find the distance between 2 points? So here we have 2 points, 4, negative 2, and 1, 2. And we want to find the distance between these 2 points. So to do this, I can imagine having created a right triangle. So here I go down 4, so the height of the right triangle is 4, and then I go to the right 3. So the length of the bottom of that triangle is going to be 3. So what I can do is I can use Pythagorean theorem to solve for this missing part, because Pythagorean theorem is used to find a missing side of a right triangle. So Pythagorean theorem says we have c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Well, right here, we can count to get the numbers 4 and 3. So I just plug a 4 in for a and a 3 in for b. And when I do that, I get c squared equals 16 plus 9. 16 plus 9 is 25. So the square root of 25 is going to be 5. So we've done this before with Pythagorean theorem. But the question is, how do I do this without having to count to get these side lengths of 4 and 3? Well, what I can do is I simply subtract the x values and subtract the y values. So looking at the x values, if we do 4 minus 1, that's going to give me 3, which was the second number. If we do negative 2 minus 2, negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4, but it's a distance, right? So we just want to make this into a positive number. So we'll just make that into a positive 4. Same thing. All right, because the distance is going to be positive. So I have 3 and 4, which were my side lengths. So bottom line, what I can do is I can think of a and b as being subtracting the x values and then subtracting the y values. All right, so if you want, you could just think of it like this. Pythagorean theorem, you got to figure out what is a and b. To do that, subtract the x's and subtract the y's. Now, if you wanted to get a more formal formula, so a more official formula, where this is solved for distance, what I do is, to get distance by itself, I take the square root of both sides. So we get distance equals the square root of all of that on the right. All right, so this is my formula. Okay, so this formula basically just comes from the Pythagorean theorem. So remember the Pythagorean theorem, figure out how to find a and b. Well, we subtract the x values and subtract the y values. So for many of you, it might be easier to actually just think of this part right here. So just think of this part before you've solved for distance. All right, but you're welcome to use either part of this formula. So now here we have another problem. So let's try our formula on this. So we know we're using Pythagorean theorem, right? C squared equals a squared plus b squared. Well, how do I find a and b? I subtract the x values and subtract the y values. So if I subtract the x values, so we have negative 4 minus 2, that's going to give me a. Subtract the b values, 2 minus negative 1, that's going to give me b. So this part right here is a, and then this is b. So we just solve that. We're going to get negative 4 minus 2, which is negative 6, squared makes it a positive 36, which, by the way, is why it does not matter which way I subtract for this one. If I do negative 4 minus 2, or 2 minus negative 4, when I square it, I get the same positive number. And then here, 2 minus negative 1 is a positive 3, so we have 3 squared, which is going to be 9. So c squared equals 36 plus 9, which is 45. So c would be the square root of 45. And I can leave it like this. I could use my calculator, or I can simplify the radical, where 45 is a product of 9 times 5. 9 is 3 times 3, so that would be 3 times 3 times 5. And I could pull out a group of 3's, because I have one group, I pull out 1 3, so I'm left with 3 times the square root of 5. So this is the distance between these 2 points. So now that we've learned how to plot the points, we've learned how to find the distance between 2 points, now we're going to switch gears a little bit and learn how to work with an equation of a circle. So to understand that, we need to understand how to graph a circle if you're given the center and the radius. So if the center is 1, negative 2, and the radius is 3, what I can do is I can find the center, which is here at 1, negative 2, so at this point. And if the radius is 3, that means anywhere from this point, from the center, we have a distance of 3. So if we go over 3 to the right, 1, 2, 3, we get this point. If we go up 3 from the center, we get this point. We go to the left 3, we get this point. And go down 3 from the center, we get this point. So if we connect each of those points with a curve, we would have created this circle, where no matter where I'm at from the center, the distance from the center is 3. So if you understand how to get this picture from the center and the radius, then the next part, what we're doing is we're given an equation of a circle, and we have to use the equation to find the center and the radius. And once we have that, we can graph. So the equation of a circle is going to be in this format right here, where it looks really confusing, but it's really just recognizing patterns. So if you have x minus a squared plus y minus b squared equals r squared, the center is going to be found by looking at this and this. But instead of it being a negative a and or negative b, you switch the signs. So it's going to be a center of positive a and positive b. And then this over here, whatever squared gives me this number, that r, that number, is the radius. Alright, so for example, if we had x minus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 9 is in the correct format for the equation of a circle. The center is an x and a y value, right? It's a point. So how do we find this x and y value? Well, look at the number with the x right here. Just change it into a positive 1. So change the sign to be a positive 1. That's my x value. And then see here we have a y. This number with the y is going to be my y value. Just change the sign to get a negative 2. So my center is here at 1, negative 2. And then the radius you find by looking at this number. So the 9, you take 3 squared to get 9. So because 3 squared gives me 9, the radius is 3. So in other words, you can think of taking the square root of this number 9. If I take the square root of 9, that gives me the radius. Alright, so I have the center, I have the radius, and if I wanted to, I could graph this circle, and when I graph this circle, we would have to go to the right 1, and then down 2 to get the center. If the radius is 3, that means from the center, I can go to the right 3, I can go up 3, 1, 2, 3, right here. I can go to the left 3, 1, 2, 3, right here. Then I can go down 3, 1, 2, 3, to get this point. I connect those dots I just created with a curve, and here is my circle, with the center at 1, negative 2, and the radius is 3. Now let's take a look at another example. Here we have x plus 3 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 16. So to find the center, again, the center is an x and a y value. It's going to be a point. So to find the x part, I look at the number with the x term right here, change the sign, that's going to be a negative 3. For the y value for the center, you look at the number with the y, which is the negative 5, change the sign, that's going to be a positive 5. So the center is at negative 3, positive 5. And the radius, we look at this number and see what squared gives me that. Or I can think the square root of 16, which would equal 4. So the center is negative 3, 5, and the radius is 4. And again, if I wanted to, I can graph this circle, because now I have the center and the radius. So if I sketch this circle, we have the center at negative 3, 5, and the radius 4. And the center would be up here, so to the left 3, then up 5. the radius is 4, which means from the center I can go to the right 4, I can go up 4, I can go down 4, and to the left 4. I connect those 4 dots I just created with a curve, and that gives me the circle. So this would have the center at negative 3, 5, and the radius would be 4. Now lastly, if you had to go the other way, where you were given the center and the radius, you would now have to write that equation of the circle. So if you have a center at 2, 6, and the radius is 2, and you were told to write the equation of the circle. Well, remember, we have x and then plus or minus something squared plus y plus or minus something squared equals, and then we have some number over here. So we have 3 different numbers to fill in. So the center, remember, the center is found by taking the opposite of the number with the x term. So the number with the x would be the opposite of this 2, which would be a negative 2. And then the number with the y, you take the opposite of this 6 to get a negative 6. And then this last part over here, we take the radius squared. So we take this 2, square it to get 4. So this here is the equation of my circle with the center of 2, 6 and the radius of 2. Now, one last thing I want to point out to you, and that is, what if you had nothing with the x term, so just x squared, plus, let's say, y minus 3 squared equals 25, and you were told to find the center. So here we're trying to find the center and the radius. So ignore the caption at the top. We're trying to find the center and the radius. Well, here we have nothing with x. So what I can do is actually think of this as x minus 0 squared. So when you see that, then notice the center would have this 0 as the x part. And then this negative 3, change the sign to a positive 3 to get the center. So my center is going to be here at 0, 3. And it's 0 because there's the number 0 with the x. There's nothing with it. And the radius is the square root of 25, which would equal 5. So if you have nothing with one of the terms, so it's just x squared or y squared with no number, then there's a 0 assumed to be with that. Alright, so then going the other way, if you had, let's say, a center given to you as being, let's say, 4, 0, and the radius is equal to 1, and you were told to write the equation. Well, again, here we'd have x and then something squared plus y, something squared, equaling something here. So the number that goes with the x, you take this number, just make it opposite, so minus 4. And then for the second part with the y, we take this y value of the center, make it opposite, which is, in this case, just 0. And then the radius is 1, so this number over here would be 1 squared. So my final answer for the equation of the circle is x minus 4 squared plus y squared equals 1 squared, which is 1. So this would be my equation. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.